stuff moves through a system from extraction to production to distribution to consumption to disposal. All together, it's called the materials economy. And you know what I found out? That is not the whole story. There is a lot missing from this explanation. For one thing, this system looks like it's fine, no problem. But the truth is, it's a system in crisis.
So my oldest son came home from school the other day and told me he'd been watching this movie here called The Story of Stuff. I had trouble not showing him that I was bothered by this. Pretty sure I rolled my eyes and made a face, but this actually made him feel better because he was bothered by what he'd heard presented as fact in his social studies class. See, about a year ago, I debunked this movie after a viewer tipped me off that it was being used in school. So when my son said he'd watched it in class, I was prepared to tell him why this movie is just plain wrong. It's not just wrong on the political slant, which it is, it's also wrong based on the facts. And this is a concern because it's a movie shown in schools across North America. I found it listed or mentioned on school board websites across the country. And this is likely being presented in your local school, taught as a fact-based analysis on what is wrong with our world. But once you see the errors that I'll point out, you should agree that no student should ever see this. Now, I could object to this film based solely on the politics of it. The Story of Stuff is a propaganda film for hard-left American political viewpoints. I could object to the fact that it's a film that mostly uses American examples, and they don't really apply to Canadian students. But let's stick to objecting to this based on the facts the movie's producers put forward to support their argument, and really, they're not facts at all.
For one thing, this system looks like it's fine, no problem. But the truth is, it's a system in crisis. And the reason it's a system in crisis is it's a linear system and we live on a finite planet. And you cannot run a linear system on a finite planet indefinitely.
Now, I take issue with this idea that we live on a finite planet and we run a linear system. It's one theory of how the world works, and the producers, well, they try to use that theory to convince us that we're running out of everything, and that's why we need to be worried. Unfortunately for the producers, the world creates more water, grows more trees, the wind continues to blow. We find new resources all the time. We find new ways of using resources, and we find more efficient and cleaner ways of running our planet all the time. Well, next, the producers get into telling young students how everything is rigged against the little guy.
Let's start with the government. Now, my friends tell me I should use a tank to symbolize the government, and that's true in many countries and increasingly in our own. After all, more than 50% of our federal tax money is now going to the military.
Hold on a second. Claiming 51% of U.S. tax dollars go to the military is patently false. Now, the film's producers did put out an annotated script with footnotes to back up their claim, so I looked at what they used to back it up. Well, they cite the War Resisters League. That's an anti-military group that takes out Social Security and Medicare spending to shrink the U.S. budget and thus increase military spending as a portion of the budget. Is this accurate? Not at all. The nonpartisan Congressional Budget Office puts spending on health care by the federal government in the U.S. at $856 billion. Social Security spending, $725 billion, and spending on the military was $699 billion. Both Social Security and health care cost more than the military. Now, I should point out that this was before Obamacare even took effect. In 2007-2008, when this movie was in production, military spending accounted for roughly 20% of U.S. government spending, and that's while the wars in Iraq and Afghanistan were both in full swing. Next, the movie goes on to claim that we as a society are trashing the planet based on how we acquire natural resources. At this point, Annie Leonard, the narrator, moves into pure polemics.
We'll start with extraction, which is a fancy word for natural resource exploitation, which is a fancy word for trashing the planet. What this looks like is we chop down the trees, we blow up mountains to get the metals inside, we use up all the water, and we wipe out the animals.
We wipe out the animals. This, ladies and gentlemen, is pure fantasy. It's also a statement designed to evoke feelings of guilt and remorse in students so that they will change their ways. It's not, however, based in fact. Neither are her subsequent claims about forests.
Where I live in the United States, we have less than 4% of our original forests left.
Now that statement, that's one that my son actually raised with me. That would lead the viewer to believe that those forests have been chopped down. They don't exist anymore. That would be false, but it's the impression the film's producers want to give. The footnote to support this claim, here's what it says. 95 to 98% of forests in the continental United States have been logged at least once since settlement by Europeans. Now, in case you've never been near a logging operation, chopping down a tree or several trees does not mean the forest disappears. Even in natural cycles where there's no logging, old trees die, new trees grow. Timber is one of the most renewable of all renewable resources. We're not losing our forests in Canada, and neither are our American friends. The National Forestry Database estimates that 43% of Canada's landmass is covered by trees. Meanwhile, the World Bank estimates that Canada's forests are at 34% of landmass, and America's forests take up 33% of their landmass. By the way, less than 0.5% of Canada's forests are harvested each year. Andy Leonard, the narrator, then moves on to claim that 80% of the world's original forests are gone. This is another spurious claim, the one that would require no tree to ever be cut down, no forest even partially logged. The reality is that the United Nations pegs the world's forests covering 30% of the entire Earth's land mass. That's after accounting for deserts, savannas, farmland, cities, and every other use there is for land. The movie then claims we are cutting and mining and hauling and trashing the place so fast that we're undermining the planet's very ability for people to live here. Really? You know, this claim's undermined by the fact that environmentalists have been making it for years, and yet the number of people on the planet continues to rise, and so does life expectancy. Ms. Leonard offers no facts to back up this claim. I could go on pointing out factual errors in the film, but I want to turn to the problem of such a political production being shown in class. It simply shouldn't happen, regardless of the slant it takes. I'm not saying that political issues can never come up in a classroom. But when one side is presented as fact and the other side is not presented at all, that's a problem. This film also engages in all-out class warfare, pitting those with money against those without. There's also a strong anti-capitalist tone and a dismissal of corporations. A couple of final thoughts on this. The teacher that showed this is a member of one of the biggest public pension plans going. The Ontario Teachers' Pension Plan boasts on its website that it holds $129.5 billion in assets. Teachers is a major investor in some of the world's biggest banks, the kind of corporations that this movie trashes. The pension plan also owns shares in Barrick Gold and Goldcorp, two of the major mining companies in the world, companies which frequently mine in the third world. Teachers also hold significant stakes in ExxonMobil, Royal Dutch Shell, TransCanada, Enbridge, and other companies involved in extracting oil and gas, or, as the story of Stuff puts it, trashing the place. If the teacher that showed this to my son believed it, he'd be giving up his pension, but I'm going to doubt that that will happen. This little movie has been seen by millions of school kids around the world, and it starts off with a good premise, that we can all be too obsessed by our stuff, and if it stayed with the message of not living a materialistic lifestyle, then I'd say good job, show it to kids. But instead, this is a movie that takes snippets of fact, lies, and innuendo and presents it all as one big giant fact-based movie. This movie should never be shown to kids, ever. You need to find out if it's in your school, if it's in your school district, and if so, push to have it removed based on the factual errors. The kids deserve better.